Welcome back to Show and Tell. So this Show and Tell this week is inspired by a comment from my friend Vic Alasi, who's a great artist and mad scientist. So he suggested that I show some of my really early stuff just to kind of put things into perspective. For those that think, that you get to a point or what you're doing today is what you've been doing all along, that is absolutely positively not true. It's a lot of work and there's a lot of frustration. And I know sometimes you see like the finished piece that I've kind of wrestled through, and the nicest compliment I can get is that I make it look easy. But for those who are struggling with certain things, any part of your art, this will hopefully give you a little bit of a boost to show you that we're all on the same path. All right. So first one, there aren't too many of them, but I figured I'd grab a few that would accurately show what's going on. So this is from way back. I was 17 when I did this. I was in high school, and as you guys know from my feeds and the other things that I talk about, my uncle, who was a Marine combat artist, really inspired me to paint. And he was a watercolorist. This is all watercolor. This is what I was doing in high school. Um, so again, at that point, I knew I wanted to paint realistically. I just didn't have the chops, across the board. I mean, as far as understanding composition and light and shadow, and I was in high school, so still learning and that kind of thing. So that's what happened. I also didn't really care about my art very much. You could see the fold in the middle of it. So apparently at one time this was folded in half. So that is that one. So then I graduated in '87 and went on to college, and in '88 I bought my first airbrush because I was so enamored by what it could do. Um, when I bought it, though, I didn't have enough money to buy the compressor. So it sat on my dresser. So we would get all these projects to do, and I would pick my airbrush as the topic. I wouldn't use an airbrush. This is an airbrush. This is, I think, monoprint. But I would do I did this basically series of family portraits of my brand new shiny airbrush that never had paint through it. So this was '88 that I did this. So things are starting to come together. College is great for me. People. I know there are a lot of different opinions about art school. The two things that art school gave to me more than anything, it didn't teach me how to paint. That type of stuff really came after. What it really taught me to do was take my art seriously, and it basically showed me how to interact with other artists, which coming from a smaller town, we had a few people that were great artists, and I still keep in contact with them. But to be thrown into a big university with all artists, you have to be able to kind of show your work and take criticism and all that. And that was what I really got out of college. So anyway, that is that one. And then in '88 I bought the airbrush, and then I started painting. So this one got damaged, unfortunately, but it's a good representation of what I was doing or how I started. I'm going to remove this because it is really damaged. So this got water damaged, but I was doing everything I could on illustration board. I don't even know what side is up on this. Oh, here it is. Okay. All right. So this is what I was doing when I first got my airbrush. This is an Aztec temple. It's supposed to be in a jungle, and like I said, it totally got water damage, which is unfortunate, but you get the idea. So this is what I was doing when I first got my airbrush, and I was learning how to cut frisket, and I was using templates poorly, and all of it, just kind of figuring it out. So that was my one of my first attempts. And there were a lot of these too. So I loved cars and planes, and I would frequently try to kind of do if you're familiar with Kimball and his car illustrations, his exploded car illustrations, they're amazing. David Kimball. So I was enamored with him too. So I started doing all these, or tried to do all these car paintings. But this would happen frequently. I'd get in over my head. You see, I kind of drew everything out. I got in over my head, and then I wouldn't know what to do. So I would just abandon the piece. And there were a lot of these. They would either get abandoned, or I'd screw them up to the point of, I don't know how to fix this thing, or any of that. I was working all on illustration board at the time. This is number 80 Bainbridge board. Cold press. Thanks, Rod. Uh, so there are a lot of these pieces that just got halfway done and then, or like this one just started and then I ran into problems and just abandoned. So yeah, so if you do get yourself in that position where you feel like you're out of control and the piece has gone completely sideways, you are not the only one. It happens all the time. I would frequently in the beginning have two or three of the same painting. As I kind of I learned more how to wrestle with that and fix those problems. I was like, okay, I'm not going to start this thing over. I'm going to figure out what I can do to fix this. So that was one of the big takeaways from that. So there was this one. Like I said, there are a lot of them. This one is a little bit later, but I was still in the, if I can't figure it out, I'll start over phase. So I started doing this. I was doing all the, freehand plants, and it came out terrible. So I ended up, now today, I wouldn't have done this. I would have just keep working it because I know looking at this, it's only the underpainting. But at the time, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking, it's not looking like what I'm supposed to. It's, I got to start it over. So that was a big thing. This I saved this panel. It's an aluminum panel. I saved this panel. I'm gonna end up still doing this painting. The idea behind this painting was that there was a big painting here, and then there was a small razor blade size piece taken out. And if you look, it's laser cut out, which is pretty cool. So there's a hole in that, and that's actual razor blade size. So the idea was have the big painting with the razor blade taken out, and then have a razor blade painting over here of that missing piece. That makes sense. So anyway, but that happened a lot. I'd be like frustrated, and it wasn't coming out the way I thought, and then I just end up, doing this. So, all right. So after a little while, by 90. I'd say by a couple of years in, I started to feel better about what I was doing. Able to kind of fix mistakes a little bit. Still learning a lot today. So this one was from a little bit later. This is 97, so I would have been airbrushing for about 9 years when I did this painting. And even at 9 years, like I see what other people are doing after just a year of airbrushing, with the education that they have out today with the internet and everything. And I'm blown away with people's progress between the time they just pick up an airbrush and when they're really doing some neat stuff. The classes that are out there, like the Airbrush Art Circus and Drew Blair's class, and just rocket people through all the pain that I was going through buying, random magazines, airbrush magazines, and trying to pick stuff up from books and things like that. So this is 9 years in, and I'll zoom in on this because this, I thought, at the time, this was I was happy with it. And given what it is, I'm happy. But if you look at the detail in this painting, so that's my thumb. So that right there is the size of what I do now, just what you're seeing. And I can jam a lot more stuff in there than I could back then, obviously, because, just lack of experience. So this one, has a bunch of things. It's fun. I look at it and I see things that are definitely tough. Like there aren't as many cut lines in this, but this was done with Frisket as well. The airplane was masked off, and then I basically hand painted the clouds, but instead of taking them to a point where they look like real clouds, I just kind of fuzzed over them with the airbrush and left it. And that's the old, that's me learning. There are cut marks in this in the illustration board, which is also an inexperienced thing. Instead of cutting just the masking material, I would cut down into the board, and so there's a little bit of that too. This one was better for blending airbrush and paintbrush. There were a couple paintings where you could see the difference between the airbrush and the paintbrush clearly. I wasn't really good at blending the two tools together, so this one was a little bit better at that. Okay. And one more. This one was around the same time, but this is a good example of the same thing. These are all gouache too, by the way, watercolor, basically opaque watercolors. And you could see how fragile it is. So this one wasn't in a sleeve, so it got all banged up. But it's the same deal with this one. The clouds are very, generic, I guess. This one would have been around the same time. I never finished this one. I abandoned this one too. Again, for whatever reason, just thought it wasn't coming out right, or wasn't happy with it, or whatever. So, there are things like the the letters and things like that, I would have cut all this out with Frisket because I didn't have the skill, and you can see this in the wing. I didn't have the skill with the paintbrush yet, so this is how the paintbrush would come out. It would be ragged and rough, and it, like I said, like anything, it takes practice. It just takes doing it. And same deal with this dude. I look at his face now, and I'm like, oh, there's so much more I could have done with that now, but that's how it rolls. So there you go. So that is the some of the history. If I can find that old, I have an old portrait that I did of my ex-wife that when we were dating in high school, we were kids, and it was my first airbrush portrait, and I save it because it is legitimately terrible. It is so bad because I didn't know how to do any of it back then, so it was me trying to figure it out. But if I can find that when I end up unpacking everything, I'll share that with you guys too. So just to kind of show you that, like I said, we're all in the same path. We're all kind of walking the same path. It's just that everyone's at a different spot. So if you're painting and you're frustrated, know that everyone has been there. Everyone has stopped at that point on the path. Just don't stop and stay there. Just keep pushing through. Just keep going. And don't get too hung up on someone who's been either doing it for a long time or has, some natural ability that puts them farther along the path. I mean, if you work at it, it is one of those things. If you work at it and really work to understand it, it's something that you can get down. So, and it's not worth getting overly frustrated about where you're at. So there you go. All right, so that is this week's. Unfortunately, none of these paintings are available. You can't have any of them because I don't want them out in public. But if you've liked these and have seen a painting that you do want that's available, you can just send me a message and I can give you the details on it. If you have a suggestion, like Vic did, which was great, if you have a suggestion for a show and tell, please let me know, and I would love to. If I've already done a painting and you have a question on that and want more detail on a painting that I've already done in show and tell, let me know that too. We can do that as well. So I am Steve Leahy. This is Show and Tell. Thank you guys for dropping by. Please like and subscribe and tell all your friends, and I will see you guys next week.